Hello, everybody. This webinar is part of the Change of Mindset United Universal Basic Income project of the Green European Foundation and its partner foundations. I'm Simo Raittila from the Green Think Tank Visio back here in Helsinki, Finland. Today we will first have a presentation by Johanna Perkiö, whose PhD relates to party political discussion on universal basic income. And she currently works as a researcher at Tampere University in ORSI project towards a co-welfare state. After this, we will hear comments from Lukas Korpelainen, who has worked on the topic for Visio before, and currently co-chairs the Green Party's Social Security Working Group here in Finland. At any time, you can ask questions in the chat, either there on Facebook or on YouTube. Both will be delivered to us. Without further ado, I will give the screen to Johanna Perkiö, and she can present on social dividends and their relationship with basic income.
Thank you, Simo, and thanks for being invited here. There are my slides now. Simo is showing them. I had some problems with sharing my screen, but hope it will work this way. So this is based on a report that I wrote last year to a political think tank, Left Forum. It's unfortunately only in Finnish. Probably I will write something about this in English in future, but I haven't done it so far. But now I will try to present the idea. So maybe you can show the next slide. You already said the main thing. So there is a picture of my report, and in this I sort of wanted to explore this idea of social dividend, its theoretical background, and then if there are any concrete proposals of implementation and what kind of proposals there are. And I found out that there are not that many proposals and not very much concrecy in how to implement such a system. So this social dividend, I see it as an alternative perspective or alternative strategy to implement a sort of basic income-like system. Like basic income, social dividend, it is universal, it is unconditional, and it is individual. So it corresponds to the definition of basic income. And this idea is originally based on the pamphlet by Thomas Paine, written 1797. Agrarian Justice was the title of this pamphlet. And in this pamphlet, Paine said that the earth is all human beings should have a share of the earth, that it belongs to all of us equally. And if the earth is privatized, then the private landowners should pay shares or pay compensation to all of those who cannot use their birthright. And this can then be expanded to other kinds of assets that can be considered as common property of the humankind. And you can go forward. So what can be considered as common resources? So first there is land that I already mentioned, and then natural resources, ecosystems you can consider as common property of the humankind, and then also oceans, atmosphere, space. These are kind of natural commons, you can say. But then there are also this kind of common inheritance created in the history of humankind, like knowledge, culture, infrastructure, technology, ideas. If you come up with a new idea or innovation, it's built on or it draws on the history of human thinking and all the ideas that have been there before and all the ideas that are there around at the moment. So it's not only that it's your personal idea that somehow just emerge in the isolation, but it's based on many ideas that were there before, and this is sort of comes to the intellectual property rights and patents and these kind of questions. Now you can change the slide. So here is a picture. I guess this is not news to many of you, but this is the global distribution of income from year 2007. So this is not distribution of wealth, but income. And you see that the highest income earners get most of it, and those at the bottom get very little. You can go to the next one. And then a similar picture about consumption-based emissions. So the richest 10% emit almost half of all consumption-based emissions, and then the poorest 50% emit only 10%. You can go to the next one. So there is a huge economic inequality, and especially in ownership. And there have been many reports by Oxfam where we find that just few richest men own as much as the poorest half of all people. And now there was a recent report by Oxfam which said that now this situation is getting even worse, that the gap between rich and poor is getting even worse with this pandemic. And then in the other end, there is precarization of work. More people work in precarious conditions with low salaries, and then the digitalization that is mostly benefiting the capital owners and displacing people from work and increasing the amount of precarious work. And the climate and biodiversity crisis, and this is slowly becoming mainstream, that we need a new kind of economic thinking, that the growth beyond environmental limits cannot continue. So a social dividend would be a new mechanism to distribute economic resources outside of the traditional labor and capital relations and outside of traditional social security. So it would be a new kind of institution that would give a share of the common property to each individual. You can change the slide. And here are some possible ways to finance a social dividend. So one is that has been now discussed is a carbon tax dividend. So you tax the emissions or tax using the fossil fuels, and then you pay an equal share of all people from those revenues. This is one option. Then there is a resource dividend that can be financed out of taxing fossil fuels or minerals, forests, for example, natural resources. The Alaskan dividend is an example of this kind of resource dividend, but it's from the ecological point of view, it's problematic because it's not linked to reducing the using the oil, but it's paid out of oil revenues, and then there can be ecological consumption taxes. some years ago there was a proposal of so-called Euro dividend by Philip van Parijs and Yannick van der Port, and this dividend was to be financed out of value-added tax. But then you can make the VAT also ecological if you make it higher for those products that are with higher ecological footprints, and then lower for those products that are with lower ecological footprints. And then can be taxation on intellectual property, such as patents or copyrights. I cannot say much about those, how it can be implemented, but these are some ideas. And then if you want to do more direct distribution, sort of correct this historical wrongness that there is so huge gap between rich and poor, then there can be taxation of capital, profits, inheritance, financial transactions, corporate tax. Of course, these are all very different measures, and so there can be different combinations, and I'm not a specialist of taxation, so I cannot say anything very specific about implementation or this kind of taxation systems, but these are possible ways of financing it. And then last, there is the central bank. There has been discussion of this helicopter money that the central bank would give, this kind of one-time payments to all people, and this could be used as if you had this infrastructure in the form of this social dividend, then you could probably, if you want to do this kind of macroeconomic policy in the time of economic downturn, you could pay money to people's account to boost consumption and the economic recovery. And then next. Sorry, I didn't notice that it changed. So what is the relationship of social dividends and social security? So in my view, social dividend could be implemented independently of reforming the national welfare system. And it would introduce a new principle of economic distribution. It would be something that we don't yet have. It would be a way to distribute outside of social security and wages and so on. And because it would be complementary to national welfare systems, it could also start with a rather modest level. We wouldn't need to have such a big amount of social dividend at first, and this would make it easier to find a political compromise on it. And what's the best thing about it, that it could be implemented on a cross-national level. It wouldn't need to be. It's reforming the social security systems is very difficult, and it's also, there are many political conflicts and different opinions how they should be reformed, but this would be something new, and then it could be implemented, for instance, on EU level. The EU doesn't have competence on social security, but because this would not be social security, this could happen on the EU level at first, combined with a carbon tax and so on, for example. And it could enable new kinds of political coalitions, because many different groups could find this kind of idea attractive. There has been interest among conservatives in the US, and then this could bring together the left-wing and right-wing actors. And I don't say that this would be easy to get through, because there are many other now. If you introduce some new environmental taxes, it's going to this corona recovery, and this would anyway a big political there would be a big political battle on it, but it would probably be anyway easier than reforming the social security systems, the basic income, or at least to introduce a new principle and idea of distributing the resources, and as to start with this idea that people get familiar with this kind of system. So that's it. Then there is the last slide where I say thank you. And there is my email address if you want to contact me afterwards. So thank you. That was all.
Thank you very much, Johanna. We will now hear from Lukas Korpelainen about what kind of thoughts Johanna's presentation raised. And then we will also have time for discussion and questions from the audience.
Yeah, thank you, Simo, for having me, and thank you, Johanna, for this very interesting presentation. Am I allowed to ask questions already? We get some comments first.
You could comment already, but maybe we can take one question from the audience now and then go on to your comments, because this is a good one.
Oh, okay.
So Ville Seppälä asks about basic income funding sources and whether a global level would be better than an European level. What would you think, or based on your readings and your report?
I would think that it would work the best on the global level, but of course global basic income is quite far from what we have now, so it would be easiest way to start with the European level, and then for carbon taxes, okay, there are different proposals how to avoid this competition, but
We seem to have a little bit of technical difficulties, at least on my screen.
But that's also what I say in my report.
Yeah, please continue. There was just a little bit of disturbance, at least for...
Yeah, I think that was all.
Okay. Well, yeah, floor is yours, Lukas.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's a very interesting question. I would say like a good starting point is to like gather the funds on the same level as the basic income is distributed. So like if you have a Finnish basic income only in Finland, the taxes are also gathered in Finland. And same thing for EU. And then if you manage to build a global system for this, obviously that would also be, of course, in the global context, obviously the global north would be like the bigger payer. But I would also like to say that then when talking about where to gather taxes from, I mean by this, what types of taxes, I would like to argue that it's good to look at different kinds of tax and not only income tax. It actually makes more sense to kind of not tie the size of basic income into this type of taxation.
Yeah. Do you have any general comments on Johanna's presentation?
Yeah. This was really interesting. I think often this idea of social dividend is kind of thought about also in the basic income discussion, but I think it's not. I think it's really explored in such depth as in your paper. I think it's kind of included as a bonus in addition to the other stuff happening in basic income. So it's really interesting, really thinking about it in its own right. And it got me thinking that when it was seen that the end result is quite similar. We are giving money, unconditional money to all the people, but then the approaches are very different. And it got me thinking that is the end result still the same? Like, would coming at it from the social security point of view or coming at it from the social dividend point of view, would these have the same end result, or would it result in something different? This was actually would be interesting to hear from Johanna.
Yeah, would you like to elaborate on the difference? At least you wrote a lot in your report about how kind of the welfare or the social security approach is different from the commons approach, which is more kind of in line with social dividend thinking.
This is actually, this basic income debate has been much about reforming social security systems, especially here in Finland, but obviously also elsewhere. But then if you look at the old text, it's more about the social dividend. Of course, many of the old texts were written at the time when there was no such social security systems in place. But this has been strong, and in the social philosophical text, like from Philip van Parijs and many others, this social dividend perspective has been there, that is principle that you should share out of the common resources. But then there has not been that many concrete proposals on how to do it, and not elaboration on how this relates to this kind of social security reform. And then I don't know, the end results, this, you cannot do micro simulations on this. You can do micro simulations on basic income as a social security reform, as in Finland there have been many done before this experiment, and there you can find the distributional effects, and of course, like this is more like speculation what will happen, but anyway, depending on how it will be financed, it's more likely to benefit more the low income people than those with high incomes, but that of course depends on taxation. And then if you implement basic income as a social security reform, of course you can finance it from many sources, and some of them can be the same as those that I mentioned. But then on the other hand, you can also have these two as separate systems.
Yeah, one interpretation that I made from this is that one thing that maybe separates these two is that in social security, obviously, it's based on the needs, the sustenance needs of the citizens. So basically, whatever people in some country need for a living, that's the need that the social security is trying to answer. But whereas in social dividend, it would seem more like that it's actually a case of that we have, let's say, like the government has, so to say, excess money from, let's say, natural resources and taxation, and instead of lowering taxes, this money is instead redistributed. So to me, it would seem that social dividend is actually like foremost a tool for wealth distribution. Would you agree with this differentiation? Sorry,
I'm not sure if I understood the question. Can you repeat it?
Sure. So sorry, it was very long-winded. Where basic income and social security is answering a question about how much do people need for their sustenance to live, and then social dividend, we're seeing that it's more of a choice of redistributing wealth, not based on how much people need to live, but just for the sake of wealth distribution. Would you agree with this notion?
Yeah, it's a different approach. Different approach. Like, of course, basic income as social security, you can make it redistributive if you want, but then you can also make it as a social security reform and make it to keep the distribution as much same as it were. And then, of course, you need to consider what is the level and so on. I don't know what else to say about this.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think that's a good point.
Yeah, I could mayhaps ask about kind of an interesting point that actually brings your TWO's reports, or your last year's report and Lucas's earlier report, close to each other, which is kind of the issue of whether a small basic income or a small social dividend could exist with a social security system. For example, Johanna write about how this could be done on the European level, so that some of the money that is being redistributed could possibly be saved from kind of national social security systems. So like, or let me rephrase this. What do you think is the merit of a small basic income or a small social dividend? And let's just say comparatively small, like smaller than like sustenance level.
I think this is also the approach that Lucas has in this report for the Green Think Tank. It's also good, like this kind of partial reform that you have different steps towards the system, like basic income, and it's another kind of. But then I think this like okay, my idea is more based on this kind of like how in this kind of ecological crisis and this context we can more equally share the resources and how we can distribute from the highest from the very rich or from the highest earners from those who for instance suffer from the environmental taxes that are flat rate taxes. So this could also be a way to get more legitimacy for the green taxes, because then if it benefits people in the form of that they get money for this, prices get higher, but then they get dividends back, then those taxes could be more legitimate.
Yeah.
So it's a different. Somehow it's the definition of the idea is the same, but it's a basic income as social security, and this is different way of viewing the idea.
Yeah, I think that you made the point well in your presentation about the wealth distribution aspect of it. Like there is, or whatever kind of, it's a distribution system first and foremost. When you are talking about, for example, the emissions that are related to income and how emissions trading schemes could be made more acceptable by introducing a social dividend or a carbon fee and dividend system, it would be it could be a significant part of a just transition towards a new kind of eco-welfare state. Would you agree?
This is the way I see it. Exactly. I think we need new institutions in this time, and this would be a new institution, like especially this kind of distributive institutions and institutions to like how people can get involved to society in alternative ways.
Would you say that ideally this kind of system would tackle multiple problems at the same time?
It could. It depends how it is implemented and how big this thing becomes. Of course, it can be only very marginal if you only have the carbon tax and you pay small dividends. Then it's probably not that important. But if it grows bigger, of course, it would change a lot.
May I
comment?
Yeah, and just as a recap for the viewers, the model proposed by Visio, or sorry, in my report, which is also in English. So yeah, the idea of a small basic income is to kind of for it to replace part of the social security system that we have now, but just to kind of like only kind of replace the bottom of it, and thus the basic income in itself would not be enough for sustenance. And I was thinking, and Johanna, in your presentation, you were talking about the approach of a modest social dividend. So I would say that the same approach can be done from the social security side, but I do agree that it is much easier to just kind of come from the outside to bring some new thing that comes on top, instead of having to kind of carve out space in the social security system and then implement basic income into it. And I do believe there's a lot of benefits to having even a small basic income, and in a small basic income that in itself is not enough to live by. I think that the idea of basic income and social dividend actually are really close to each other in this case, because it's not meant to be the sole sustenance of anyone, but it still helps, and it's still seen as a means of wealth distribution. But I was wondering, I kind of have like a slight fear that if a social dividend is implemented, that what would stop social security just kind of like taking that into account and basically like relieving pressure from the existing social security, because in my report it's done explicitly so that that is replacing part of social security, and the whole size of the transfer is the same, and then increasing that transfer from the government is like a separate question. So what would be like some like so to say checks and balances to keep the social security system from just taking the social dividend into account and lowering other money transfers? Sorry, long question again.
Yeah, probably there would be pressure to cut the social security if you had this kind of system. And then if the social dividend grows big, then of course you could replace part of social security systems with that. But then it could also be a barrier for developing the social security systems if you said that, okay, but they get the social dividends, that now we don't need to increase social security, or we can cut the benefits. But then over time, if in case this social dividend would grow big, then of course it could come to replace some parts of social security. But then, it's complex if you cannot define what exactly is its relationship to the social security.
Yeah, but would this be especially an issue, kind of, if it is implemented at European level? And would this have an effect on, or should the amount be the same in every country, for example?
That's also another question. In this Euro dividend by Philip van Parijs and Yannick Vanderborg, it was something around 2014. Anyway, some years ago. So they proposed that the amount would be about 200, but they said that it could also be different for different countries depending on or it could be different for different age groups, that you could make it higher for old people, for example. But then on the EU level, somehow I see that if it were the same for all countries, that then it would also redistribute among the richer and poorer EU countries and richer and poorer regions of the EU.
Yes. You mentioned one of the proposals here, but you're also an expert on kind of the discussion around basic income. And what is interesting to me is kind of both the ideas of helicopter money, as suggested by Positive Money Europe, and the current European Citizens Initiative campaign. Those are both proposals to introduce some form of basic income or social dividend at an European level. How kind of viable do you see these proposals, and what kind of issues would you say that they will face in the discussions?
I don't know very well the contents of any of those two proposals, but I know that they are there. But with the citizens' initiative, I think it's problematic just that the social security is not at the competence of the EU, and but I'm not very well aware how it was planned with that initiative, how it was planned to be implemented. Then the proposal of the positive money EU is more feasible in a way, because then there has also been quite a lot of interest to this kind of helicopter money distribution.
Yeah, could either of you quickly define kind of the idea of helicopter money, if there are any viewers who are not familiar with the concept?
So helicopter money is a one-time payment from the central bank to all people of the for example, in the EU it would be to all Euro countries, or it could be to all EU countries. So it's a one-time payment, and it's more like this kind of macroeconomic recovery tool. If you have a recession like now, then you pay people that they would consume more, they would buy more products, and then the economy will go up.
Yeah, thank you. At this point, I would want to remind everybody that we are happy to take questions, and you can also give your own comments in the discussion, either on Facebook or here on YouTube. And we will kind of happily take the discussion in any direction that you're interested in. You were talking about the current recession, and of course the current recession is related to this terrible pandemic of COVID-19 that we've had for about a year now. What is there a relationship or kind of a renewed interest in basic income or social dividends, in your view, related to the pandemic?
Now many countries have implemented this kind of direct cash payments, and they are very close to basic income in a way. And some countries, some Asian countries have also implemented this kind of helicopter money that they have paid one-time payments to all citizens, like Japan and I don't remember which other country did this. So this could probably institutionalize this kind of new kind of distribution or new kind of social security that is based on this kind of direct payments without many conditions. But we will see what will happen afterwards. And of course, it made us aware of that the current social security systems are not quite well prepared to this kind of sudden shock that many people suddenly get unemployed and lose their jobs. And here in Finland, the system was able to react quite well, because then we extended the unemployment benefit to self-entrepreneurs, and the system was quite flexible for that. But in many countries there was not, like the social security system didn't cover many groups that lost their jobs. And because of that, they have implemented this kind of new cash transfers.
Yeah, I totally agree that the corona pandemic has exacerbated the pre-existing problems that we've had in our system. But I think, to my ears, I haven't heard people talking about basic income any more than before, but maybe more talking about the same, like the same topic, but just with different words. For example, a lot of people have been talking about koronatuki, like corona aid. Basically, the stuff that Johanna was mentioning, but I think somehow basic income or social dividend as a word hasn't been brought up as much as maybe it could have been.
Yes. Do you have more comments or questions, Lucas, which you would like to bring up?
Yeah. Well, yes, indeed. Actually, yeah. One question that came to mind from Johanna's presentation, and actually, this is kind of related to the question about also like how big should the payout be the same for all countries? And I'm in my mind, the kind of price parity way of thinking is more akin to social security, so it's based on need instead of paying out some amount of money based on in a way having that one piece of stock in a country. But I was wondering that will social dividends always be kind of based on tied to a certain taxation, let's say public income from let's say oil money or something like that, and would the size of a social dividend then fluctuate also accordingly, based on how much money the government is getting from that source? Because if it's not based on the needs as in social security, would it then be a fluctuating sum?
That's one question. Okay, basic income as such is not based on the need. Okay, you have it at a certain level that is based on the need, but everyone gets it still. But that's one question that relates to this kind of eco taxes, because then the revenue that you get from those taxes, if you want to have the impact that using the resource that using certain resource goes down, then probably the level of tax that you need for that is not the same that would make the biggest revenue for basic income. So that's one question. And then if you, for example, in the case of fossil fuels, then the goal is that they will not be used anymore, or they will be used very little, and then also you will not get much money out of them in the end. So then you will need other ways of financing it if you want to maintain this system. And then the other way is this: if it fluctuates, it could be used as a macroeconomic tool, for example, by the central bank, that you could then in the economic downturns to give more money to people to consume, and then if the economic situation is good, then you would give them less money.
To kind of clarify, would you say that when coupled with like an economic shift or an economic transition, the social dividend would most often be a transitionary measure, and only a measure that is in place for until people can get over the hump or over the situation when the technology is more advanced and cheap, for example?
That's one possibility, but on the other hand, a basic income-like system would also be quite a welcome reform for future, especially if you think from this ecological point of view, that you would have such a system in place.
Yeah, it would probably facilitate more or kind of a less consumption-based lifestyle. At
least if you make it financed in that way that you tax the environmentally harmful consumption or production, then you could at the same time provide means of subsistence to people, but then also steer the consumption or production towards more sustainable with this kind of eco taxes.
Yes.
But then,
no, please.
No, I actually didn't have anything specific.
Okay, yeah. But I'm also kind of hitting the end of my prepared questions. So would you like to take concluding remarks, or do you have questions for each other?
I'd like to ask Johanna, how do you feel that the topic should be furthered going on into the future? Where is the greatest potential for social dividend to be implemented or to be developed more?
What is the greatest potential?
For example, do you think that social dividend would have the greatest potential of being developed on the EU level or maybe global level, perhaps, or what kind of possible future developments might be ahead of us for social dividend?
I think the EU level seems most realistic level for it. But then, of course, you could implement such a system also at the national level if you want. I don't know what else to say about it, but the EU level would be, and with the carbon tax or something like that, that could be the most realistic way to start with.
Yeah, I could maybe ask, because Johanna, you studied kind of in this case, all kinds of discussion and different proposals that have been made. Do you have an idea about kind of in what direction is there some sort of a hole in the discussion, something that should be discussed more in the coming years, or something that should be
in general
about social dividends or basic income? What are kind of the things that should be studied more or discussed more?
I suppose it should be studied more how they could be financed, what are the best ways of financing them. And of course, now I have mentioned this carbon tax many times because it has been discussed more, but then of course ecological consumption tax, and I also want to underline that we need this kind of more redistributive taxes, like there could be a EU level or even global tax on wealth, something like Thomas Piketty has proposed. And this could be one way, or corporation tax, financial transaction taxes, many taxes that have been discussed. And of course, there are many, you could use the revenues in many different ways, like for green investments and so on. But this is one way that could make it at least more acceptable to people. And benefit the poor, because there is always with the eco taxes, there is always this question of what kind of distributional impact they will have.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I wholeheartedly agree. Anything to add, Lucas?
Yeah, I mean, like I earlier mentioned, at least in the case of basic income, I believe in not earmarking the financing of basic income to any particular tax. So basically, just taking the money from the government budget as any other expenses. But then when it comes to social dividend, I think it's also interesting to think about it as a means of redistributing wealth from the finite, or so. Like, for example, property tax or tax on land is very interesting, because that's something that basically there's like in a way, a government has a monopoly of kind of governing over some part of land, and then it kind of distributes property rights to citizens, but still it's kind of maintaining it. So like this very kind of Georgist approach, I think, is also interesting in combining with a social dividend. That is distributing land tax income.
Mm.
Yeah, just I popped a question there, or kind of point from Ville Seppälä there, which was about how the European emissions trading system, money currently collected through it is not is something would be somewhere between 15 to 100 euros per person per year. So that at the current levels, that would not be a viable choice, for example, to finance and social dividend or basic income of a meaningful level. But I have to add that Johanna very well noted, there are very many different proposals on how to find or what sort of social dividend or a source of basic income funding should be put in place, and further discussion and studies will be needed on this. On behalf of Green Think Tank Visio, I would like to thank you both for this discussion. Thanks to everybody who's watching this now or later, as this will be up on YouTube, for example. Is there anything that you would like to say before I cut the feed? Maybe Lucas first and Johanna then.
Yeah. Thank you for this discussion. It was really interesting. Also, and thank you, Johanna, for your text. I think I'm definitely going to be maybe trying to implement these ideas also into the new social security program that we're devising in the Green Party. I think, as Simo maybe mentioned in the beginning. So thank you for these ideas.
Thank you also for inviting me here. It was a nice discussion, and it's great that you are interested in this idea. And I was hoping that the smart brains will start thinking about this, and now I'm happy to hear that it will happen. So my purpose was the purpose of my report was to introduce this idea and explore different ways, but then I will leave it to others to take it further, how it could be implemented in the end. So thanks.
Yes, thank you very much to both of you. Let's hope that at some point Johanna's text will also be available in English, or at least kind of a small introduction based on it. As I said before, the report by Lucas is available at the Green European Foundation's website. And thank you for everybody who's been here with us. To the next time, I hope, and the more discussions on social justice, just transition, and basic income. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and stay safe.
Thank you.